Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, dust, serfs, peasants, vassals, minions. Welcome. I'm the Useful Idiot, and today I want to talk about Israel again. And this is about the institutional racism in Israel. And once again, I'm not singling out Israel for any particular reason. I have no grudge in the truest sense of the word against Israel. I only hold them to the same standards as I hold every other nation. And therefore, when I look at the ample evidence of institutional racism in Israel, I feel that I am legitimately able to criticize it. So let me say that about that. And any charges that people want to make about anti-Semitism, I have a video that I will attach below called Why Criticizing Israel Has Nothing to Do with Anti-Semitism. But let me get back to the big picture here. So we have this illusion of a liberal democracy, but it's only in Israel, but it's only for a small proportion of the population. And they have no constitution, so all the rights there are arbitrary and mutable. And they use this very mutable legal system in order to perpetrate a lot of pretty abhorrent racial discrimination laws and segregation laws. And not to mention the fact that Israel as the state keeps raising the bar for the Arab population in the state of Israel now. Because before, all they demanded was the respect for their right to exist, but now they want it to be able to declare Israel a Jewish state, effectively shutting out the religions of other people that have lived on that land for thousands of years, including Christians, incidentally. And many of the Christian population in Israel are Palestinian Christians. And so let's get down to some of the gruesome details. First of all, I want to talk about a UN committee on the elimination of racial discrimination. And they did a study, and they found they were, quote, appalled at the hermetic character of segregation, unquote, and said that racial discrimination was found in every facet of Israeli life. And Israel always maintains international conventions do not apply in occupied territories, and that's part of the problem. They have these zones where they put Arabs in, and then maintain that international conventions don't apply in these occupied territories. And they have completely segregated educational systems for Jews and Arabs, and certainly Palestinians. And they even have segregated municipal governments, so even the governments are separated. Of course, a lot of that is to facilitate the separation of what's little land is left for the Palestinians and all the land that is part of Israel now. But there's an underlying discrimination that is based on. We also see that Ethiopian Jews are discriminated against. They get the lowest paid jobs and are subjected to racial slurs. And then we see refugees from Sudan being sent back before being sterilized, women being sterilized before they're sent back. And these all also smack of a certain racism. And Palestinians are barred from nearly everything in Israel. And we've seen the way that Israel has perpetrated a blockade on Gaza, and an unimaginable list of things that are not available to 2 million people. And we see the same thing for Palestinians just in Israeli daily life at all. So Palestinians are excluded almost entirely, and then observers from around the world sometimes wonder why they feel disenfranchised. And it's against the law to try and convert a Jew. And in fact, Jews are not allowed to marry non-Jews. Arabs and Muslims are forbidden from living in major housing developments in many entire regions in the country. They have segregated bus systems. Arabs and Palestinians are banned from all settlements. There's separate roads in between a lot of these communities to keep these individuals from even seeing each other. A lot of people seem to be in disbelief when you say that a lot of Palestinians may never even see an Israeli other than an Israeli soldier. and a lot of Israelis will never see a Palestinian. That's how separated they are. When you think about communities separated by 24-foot wall, twice the size of the Berlin Wall. And think about that. I mean, does one need to even use any other examples when you look at gigantic walls being built around Palestinian Arab communities, 24 feet high, to separate them from the Israeli population? It's called security by Israel, but by any standards, it's utter apartheid and a very visible symbol of it. And Gaza, anybody from Gaza must apply for permits to travel anywhere outside Gaza. There's an ongoing policy of home demolitions and displacement, where a lot of settlements are built. So this destruction of Palestinian land and confiscation and demolitions and displacement continues. All the original Arabic town names were changed to Jewish names. So that's another fact that bespeaks of a certain amount of racism for Israelis to come in and take Arabic town names that have existed for, once again, thousands of years, that are now given Jewish names. Like I say, there's no intermarrying. Families are split between Gaza and West Bank and are not allowed a lot of contact, which seems very colonial and racist. And then we have racist and xenophobic remarks that constantly dominate political discourse, and that's a topic for a whole other video, is the amount of overt and explicit racism in comments by major members of the Knesset and other prominent figures in Israeli media, certainly the military. And one of the reasons we find a lot of this is because we have an Israeli society that's so dominated by the military. So let's always remember that a military mechanism is demonization. They have to use it. That's how you get people to do such horrible things to other people, is you have to demonize them. And Israel is no different than any other country. And so to be a culture so saturated with the military and the glorification of the military, it's no wonder that racism is a prime element in that society. But the fact that there's so much racism in Israel, of course, is multi-layered and very complex. And in fact, one of the more interesting aspects of it is the fact that it stretches so far back into the history of Zionism. And I'm going to do a separate video on that because it's such a big topic and such an interesting topic. But the very development of how this endemic and systemic racism, institutional racism, has been part of Zionism all along. And once again, I'm not trying to be an Israel basher. I'm trying to be very objective and just present the facts. And I don't see how anybody who can rationally look at all these elements of what's going on in Israeli society and say that there is not an institutional racism in Israel. And you can actually get a 5-year prison sentence for preaching Christianity outside of a church. And this even includes giving a New Testament to a Jewish friend. And that includes many other gifts as well. And of course, they treat Muslims the same way. And that's one of the points I've tried to make as well, that Jewish or Zionist racism, very distinct difference. The Zionist racism obviously has similar feelings toward Christianity and Islam, because either way, it's not allowed there. And we've seen this by the marginalization of a Christian population that had lived in Israel for a long time too. So there's an exclusion of Christians as well. They love having Christians come to visit as tourists and spend money, especially American Jews, but they want them to go home. And but ideally, Israel would certainly like the rest of the Jews all over around the world to move to Israel. And this racism has been more pronounced, certainly since the Netanyahu and Likud party have been in power. And in fact, in 2009, one of the more right-wing Knessets was elected in Israel, and members immediately began introducing a flood of discriminatory legislation that seeks to dispossess Arab citizens of Israel and exclude them from the land, turn their citizenship from a right to a conditional privilege, to limit the ability of Arab citizens and their parliamentary representatives to participate in political life, to criminalize political acts or speech that questions the Jewish or Zionist nature of the state, and privileges Jewish citizens in the allocation of state resources. And I'll attach a list below. It's actually a fairly extensive list of a lot of very segregation, apartheid, racist-oriented legislation that you find in Israel. So it's all very codified, and one of the reasons why we can refer to it as institutional. And one of the other things that's interesting is that the day of Israel's independence is a day of celebration in Israel, and as you would imagine, it's the Hanukkah for the Palestinians, a day of mourning. And it's even codified in Israeli law that it's against the law to celebrate overtly Hanukkah, the day of mourning. So just another aspect, another layer. So, and then we have a state that is completely checkered with walls, checkpoints, separate transportation systems. All Arab development is denied. So there's only destruction. There's no new Arab development. And as I say, Muslims do not have the same equal access to land or natural resources or water or other utilities. And one of the ways that Israel makes sure that their land can never be separated again, including all the new settlements, is they build the infrastructure, including water and electric systems, to make sure that it's all integrated into a giant grid as part of Israel. And it makes any future talks of changing some of these settlements out of the question. And as you would imagine, there's administrative detention for Arabs. They're held indefinitely with no charges and no trial. There's a lot of no judicial access for Arabs and Muslims. And of course, this also applies to the Golan Heights, incidentally. So even non-Palestinian areas, it's just Arabs in general. Excuse me. And then on top of that, we have this layer of blatant racist violence from the settlers themselves, very Orthodox Jews with very extreme right-wing views, and they're recognized by some international organizations as terrorists themselves. So, and then let's remember that 10,000 Palestinians reportedly are in Israeli prisons, and often with no charges and no trial, and also a lot of children. So, it doesn't paint a very good picture, and once again, just a wake-up call that some of the global perception, because of its network, this global propaganda network that Israel has, a lot of these unsavory aspects about the nature of their society are overlooked. And once again, I state that I only criticize Israel on the same playing field that I criticize everyone else, and it's not about Jews, it's about Zionism. And Zionism is an actual thing. It's not a made-up name for conspiracy theorists. It's an actual movement, it's an actual philosophy, it's an actual political ideology with religious aspects, and it's very fair game to talk about the criticism of Zionism and not necessarily be making an ethnic or racial or religious slur against Jews. So we always have to keep that in mind. It's a very, very, very important distinction. It's the ideology that has created this state. It's not the Jews who have created this racism. The state has created this racism, and the state has created this racism in the population. One can make that argument. Once again, why it's not necessarily an attack on Jews. Certainly a lot of American Jews and Jews in Israel do not approve of these policies. So it's not about that. So let's keep our eye on the actual target. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.